The Gulf of Oman at 3:44 p.m. was not the Strait of Hormuz. That distinction mattered, operationally and strategically, in a way that the geographic proximity of the two bodies of water could obscure if you were looking at a map rather than a chart. The Strait of Hormuz was 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, a confined and heavily documented transit corridor where every vessel's movement was tracked by at least 4 national intelligence services simultaneously, and where the established patterns of IRGCN harassment operations had been logged, analyzed, and reported for decades. The Gulf of Oman was different. Broader, less confined, with a different tactical geometry, the Iranian coast to the north, the Omani coast to the south, and between them enough open water that the close-quarters boxing and swarming that characterized Hormuz operations was harder to execute at the same density. The Gulf of Oman was where the IRGCN operated when it wanted to make a point that did not require the strait's specific geographic constraints. It was where the longer-range engagement geometries were possible, the approach from 15 nautical miles rather than 4, the single vessel rather than the swarm, the deliberate and documented escalation rather than the chaotic fast boat swarming that dominated the Hormuz tactical record. At 3:44 p.m., the IRGCN had a point to make. The U.S. destroyer had been in the Gulf of Oman since 0800, conducting a presence operation that was part of a broader Fifth Fleet posture in the approaches to the strait. The transit had been routine for 7 hours and 34 minutes. The watch had cycled twice. The contact picture had been standard Gulf of Oman traffic, commercial tankers on the southern routes, Omani Coast Guard activity near Muscat, a Pakistani maritime patrol aircraft at altitude that had checked in on the coordination frequency and continued its transit. At 3:44 p.m., the contact that had been logged since 2:31 a.m. as IRGCN Patrol, Chabahar area, routine patrol pattern, changed its behavior. Bridge CIC. Contact Kilo 1, bearing 012, range 14.3 nautical miles. Contact has departed its standard patrol pattern and is now on a direct intercept heading. Speed increase, now 24 knots. Contact is single hull, consistent with IRGCN Zolfaghar-class fast attack. CPA estimate, 300 yards. Time to CPA, approximately 36 minutes. A single vessel. Not the swarm geometry of Hormuz operations. Not the multi-axis approach of the 4-vector UAV scenario. One contact, one Zolfaghar-class, 24 knots from 14 nautical miles with a 36-minute approach. The geometry was deliberate and the timeline was deliberate. 36 minutes was long enough to build a specific kind of tension, long enough for both sides to make decisions, long enough for the approach to be documented at every stage, long enough for the IRGCN to communicate something through its behavior before it arrived. The officer of the deck watched the contact track for 2 sweep cycles and then pressed the intercom. At 3:46 p.m., the captain stepped onto the bridge. He studied Kilo 1's track for 15 seconds. Single contact, 24 knots, 14 miles, 36 minutes. He noted what was different from every prior Hormuz encounter he had studied. The range at initial contact. 14 nautical miles was not a swarming range. It was a deliberate approach range. You didn't launch a harassment swarm from 14 nautical miles. The geometry didn't favor it. You launched a deliberate approach from 14 nautical miles when you wanted to demonstrate that you had been watching, that you had chosen your moment, and that you were coming with a specific purpose that wasn't reactive but planned. He had read the IRGCN operations reports for the past 3 years. He had read the escalation doctrine assessments. He was aware that the IRGCN's tactical library included a specific instrument that appeared in the Master Prompts escalation section under the heading of non-kinetic maximum tier tools. And that had never been deployed against a U.S. naval vessel in an encounter that was subsequently reported through official channels as a confirmed event. The instrument was the warning signal round, a pyrotechnic device fired across or near another vessel's bow as a formal maritime demand signal carried by naval and Coast Guard vessels globally, internationally recognized as a demand to stop or alter course and entirely legal to fire in international waters as a recognized maritime communication. A warning signal round was not a weapon. It was a signal. Its meaning was precise and universal in the maritime world. You are directed to stop or comply. The vessel that fired it was communicating a demand. The vessel that received it was being told something specific. The IRGCN had never used it against a U.S. Navy warship in a documented encounter. That did not mean they didn't have them, or that they hadn't considered using them, or that the current encounter, a single vessel, a deliberate approach, 36 minutes, was not building toward exactly that. I have the con. CPA to Kilo 1, 285 yards. Time, 34 minutes. At 3:48 p.m., Channel 16 opened from Kilo 1. In Farsi first, then English, with the specific cadence of a broadcast that had been prepared and rehearsed. American warship. This is the Islamic Republic of Iran Coast Guard vessel operating in the waters of the Gulf of Oman. You are operating in waters adjacent to the sovereign territory of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Your presence and activities are not authorized by the Iranian government. You are directed to immediately alter course away from Iranian maritime interests and depart these waters. Failure to comply will result in enforcement action. This is your official warning. Failure to comply will result in enforcement action. The specific phrasing of a formal maritime demand. The broadcast had named itself an official warning. In the maritime world, official warning before a signal round was part of a documented sequence. The broadcast was step 1. The captain did not respond on Channel 16. CPA to Kilo 1, 270 yards. Time, 32 minutes. At 3:49 p.m., the captain authorized the Seahawk for launch, not for close approach, but for a documentation orbit at 300 feet. At 300 feet, the Seahawk's camera would have a continuous aerial perspective on Kilo 1's approach, its deck configuration, any change in its topside equipment posture, and the moment, if it came, of any pyrotechnic activity. The Seahawk launched at 3:50 p.m. At 300 feet, it established an orbit that kept it between the destroyer and Kilo 1's approach track, slightly north of the direct line. CPA to Kilo 1, 255 yards. Time, 30 minutes. At 3:51 p.m., the fire control radar entered active tracking mode on Kilo 1. At 12.6 nautical miles, the fire control radar's tracking solution on a single fast attack vessel was precise and locked. The emissions reached Kilo 1 within seconds of activation. Whatever EW capability the Zolfaghar-class carried, and IRGCN vessels of this class carried basic threat detection, the crew knew within 90 seconds of the activation that they were inside a fire control tracking solution. Channel 16 was silent from Kilo 1. CPA to Kilo 1, 245 yards. Time, 29 minutes. The Gulf of Oman at 3:51 p.m. was quiet, in the way that large open bodies of water were quiet in the middle of the afternoon. Low swell from the southwest, light wind, the haze that built over the Gulf in the hours after midday, reducing visibility to approximately 8 nautical miles. At 8 nautical miles, Kilo 1 was not yet visible to the naked eye. It was a radar return and a fire control solution and a 24-knot track. It would become visible to the naked eye at approximately 3 nautical miles. At 3:53 p.m., the first friction event arrived. 5th Fleet's Bahrain Operations Center had been monitoring the contact picture through the destroyer's real-time data feed since 3:46 p.m., when the contact was first reported as having altered its patrol pattern. At 3:53 p.m., a priority message arrived on the satellite command channel. Its content was operational context rather than instruction. 5th Fleet had noted the Channel 16 broadcast from Kilo 1, assessed it as consistent with a pre-signal round warning sequence, and was coordinating with the embassy in Muscat and the embassy in Tehran through the State Department duty officer. 5th Fleet was requesting that the destroyer maintain maximum documentation posture and report any pyrotechnic activity immediately. The message ended with a single line: full operational discretion to commanding officer for response measures. Full operational discretion. 5th Fleet had assessed the situation, identified the likely trajectory, and placed the response decision where it belonged, with the commanding officer on scene who had the full picture and the full authority. The captain acknowledged receipt and noted the assessment. Fifth Fleet's characterization of the Channel 16, broadcast as consistent with a pre-signal round warning sequence, confirmed that the institutional interpretation matched his own. The question was not whether Kilo 1 was building toward a signal round. The question was what the signal round would mean when it arrived, and what the response to it would mean. CPA to Kilo 1, 220 yards. Time, 26 minutes. He had been thinking about the response since the Channel 16 broadcast at 3:48 p.m. In the maritime world, a signal round fired across another vessel's bow was a communication that demanded a response. But the response did not have to be compliance with the demand. The response could be a counter-communication that made the demanding vessel's position untenable. A signal round said, "You are directed to stop or comply." The counter-communication said, "I hear your direction, and I'm telling you what compliance looks like from my side and what it does not look like, and why the math of this interaction does not favor your preferred outcome." The fire control radar was part of that counter-communication. It had been tracking Kilo 1 since 3:51 p.m. The CIWS was next. He would authorize CIWS passive tracking before Kilo 1 reached 5 nautical miles, close enough that the barrel's orientation toward the contact would be visible to the Seahawk's camera and documentable. The sequence was being built deliberately, one step at a time, each step in the record before the next step was taken. The signal round, if it came, would arrive in that record. It would arrive as a signal fired by a vessel that had been under continuous fire control radar tracking for the preceding period, with CIWS passive tracking active, with a Seahawk documenting from altitude, with Fifth Fleet watching in real time, with the embassy in Muscat and the State Department duty officer in the coordination loop, and with an encounter record that had been building since the Channel 16 broadcast 20 minutes earlier. A signal round in that record was a different event than a signal round, fired against a ship that was managing a 9-vessel swarm at 300 yards. A signal round fired against a ship in full tactical readiness, under fire control tracking in a completely documented sequence, was a data point in an encounter record rather than a demand that created compliance pressure. The response to a signal round wasn't compliance. The response was already built. The response was everything that was already in the record. CPA to Kilo 1, 195 yards. Time, 23 minutes. At 3:57 p.m., the CIWS completed its power on and entered passive thermal tracking mode. The barrel oriented toward Kilo 1 and followed its bearing as the contact moved. At the Seahawk's altitude of 300 feet, the CIWS barrel's orientation was visible in the aerial camera, the system tracking the incoming contact with the specific mechanical precision of a close-in weapon system, doing what it was designed to do in the presence of a potential threat. CPA to Kilo 1, 185 yards. Time, 22 minutes. At 4:02 p.m., Kilo 1 reached 8 nautical miles and became visible to the naked eye through the bridge binoculars. A low, fast hull at 24 knots, its bow throwing spray in the moderate Gulf of Oman swell, no flag visible at this distance, the Zolfaghar-class profile recognizable from the specific silhouette that the intelligence briefings had made familiar. The contact was visible. It was real in the way that radar returns were not quite real. The physical fact of a vessel approaching at 24 knots from the north in the Gulf of Oman at 4:02 p.m. in the afternoon. At 4:04 p.m., the second friction event arrived. The Seahawk pilot reported from his documentation orbit, "Bridge, Seahawk. I have a clear view of Kilo 1's forward deck at 6.8 nautical miles. I can see crew activity on the forward section. One crew member appears to be moving toward the forward rail area. I cannot classify the equipment at this range, but the crew movement pattern is consistent with preparation of a deck-mounted system." Continuing documentation. Crew movement toward the forward rail. Preparation of a deck-mounted system. Deck-mounted pyrotechnic launching systems on IRGCN fast attack vessels were positioned forward on the vessel's bow section, oriented to fire forward and to the sides. The pattern the Seahawk pilot was describing was the pattern of a crew preparing the system rather than simply monitoring it. The captain noted the report. He made his second decision. CIC bridge. Activate LRAD. Direct toward Kilo 1. I want a broadcast ready in Farsi. Use the standard maritime warning format. United States warship. Your vessel is under fire control radar tracking and CIWS active tracking. You are directed to cease your approach and maintain safe distance. Any pyrotechnic device fired from your vessel toward this ship will be logged as a hostile signal event and will be responded to in accordance with standing rules of engagement. The LRAD broadcast was in Farsi. Not because the IRGCN crew did not speak English. The prior Channel 16 broadcast had included an English version, but because Farsi in an LRAD-directed broadcast at 6.5 nautical miles was a specific message about the U.S. vessel's preparation and capability. It said, "We know your language, we know your vessel, we know what you are preparing, and we have been watching you long enough to address you in your own language at this range." The LRAD broadcast went at 4:06 p.m. At 4:07 p.m., Kilo 1 fired the signal round. Not a weapon. A pyrotechnic device, a flare-type signal round, launched from the forward section of the Zolfaghar-class by the crew member who had moved to the forward rail area, arcing across the destroyer's bow from port to starboard at approximately 350 yards separation at the arc's closest point to the destroyer's hull. The round described a trajectory, up and over a red-orange flare that burned for approximately 12 seconds before extinguishing over the water to the starboard side of the destroyer. The Seahawk's camera recorded the full trajectory from launch to extinction. On the bridge, the signal round was visible through the forward bridge windows. The specific arc of a pyrotechnic round in daylight, less dramatic than it would have been at night, but entirely visible, entirely documented. The specific red-orange of a maritime signal flare against the Gulf of Oman's afternoon haze. The captain watched the round's trajectory without speaking. He watched it arc across the bow and extinguish. He noted the range, 350 yards at closest point. He noted the bearing. He noted the time, 4:07 p.m. Channel 16 opened from Kilo 1, 30 seconds after the round extinguished. American warship, you have received an official warning signal. You are directed to halt your operation and depart these waters immediately. This is your final warning before enforcement action. Final warning before enforcement action. The maritime sequence had completed. Verbal warning on Channel 16, signal round across the bow, verbal follow-up. The sequence was documented in order in the encounter record. The captain picked up Channel 16. IRGCN vessel. Kilo 1. This is a United States warship conducting a lawful freedom of navigation operation in international waters of the Gulf of Oman. You have fired a pyrotechnic signal round. This event has been documented from the moment of launch to the moment of extinction by aerial camera, ship-mounted sensors, and satellite data link to 5th Fleet Command. The signal round, the Channel 16 broadcasts preceding it, and the current broadcast are all in the encounter record. You are currently inside a fire control radar tracking solution and inside CIWS passive tracking coverage. We are maintaining our current course and speed. Any further pyrotechnic activity will be treated as a hostile signal event and responded to accordingly. Kilo 1, stand down your approach and return to your patrol area. The broadcast was in the record. It was on Channel 16, which the Finnish Maritime Authority equivalent in Oman's Maritime Authority and the UAE Coast Guard monitoring stations were logging. It was the U.S. destroyer's response to the signal round. Not compliance, not silence, but a specific and documented counterstatement that named what had happened, named what was in place, and named what would follow from further escalation. CPA to Kilo 1, 160 yards. Time 18 minutes. Kilo 1 did not respond on Channel 16. At 4:09 p.m. the tel appeared. Kilo 1 reduced speed from 24 knots to 18 knots, visible across 2 radar sweep cycles. The CPA projection, which had been holding at 160 yards, shifted outward. 175 yards, then 185 as the speed reduction propagated. Not a course change, a speed reduction. But the speed reduction, coming 30 seconds after the U.S. destroyer's Channel 16 response to the signal round, was a specific behavioral data point. Kilo 1 had been at 24 knots since 3:44 p.m. It was at 18 knots at 4:09 p.m. The sequence was: signal round fired, channel 16 response received, speed reduced. The CPA continued to open, 190 yards, 200, 210, as the speed reduction continued over successive sweeps. Kilo 1 was now decelerating in a pattern consistent with a vessel that had completed the action it had been building toward and was assessing the situation before committing to the next step. Or, more precisely, assessing the situation and determining that the next step, whatever enforcement action the Channel 16 broadcasts had referenced, was not a step that the tactical situation favored. The fire control radar was tracking Kilo 1. The CIWS was tracking Kilo 1. The Seahawk was documenting Kilo 1. Fifth Fleet had the full picture in real time. The signal round was in the record as a documented event, not as a leverage point. The Channel 16 response had named it as a hostile signal event and had named the response posture in place. Kilo 1's commanding officer had received all of that information within 60 seconds of the signal round's extinction. The blink came at 4:11 p.m. Kilo 1 altered course 12 degrees to the east, away from the destroyer's transit course, away from the original intercept geometry. The CPA projection, which had been opening due to speed reduction, now opened further as the course change moved Kilo 1's track away from the destroyer's position. 240 yards, 290, 340 over successive sweeps. The Seahawk pilots report at 4:12 p.m. Bridge, Seahawk. Kilo 1 is altering course east and continuing to decelerate. I'm now showing approximately 12 knots. The forward deck crew member has moved away from the forward rail area. No further pyrotechnic preparation visible. Contact appears to be breaking off its approach. Breaking off its approach. The arc of the encounter, the Channel 16 broadcast, the 36-minute deliberate approach, the signal round, the Channel 16 response, the tell, the blink, had completed. Kilo 1 was at 340 yards, CPA and opening, decelerating to patrol speed. Its forward deck crew returned from the forward rail. The fire control radar remained in tracking mode until Kilo 1 had opened to 8 nautical miles at 4:24 p.m. Then, standby mode. CIWS to passive surveillance. The Seahawk maintained its documentation orbit for an additional 12 minutes, recording the full withdrawal track, then recovered to the flight deck at 4:37 p.m. At 4:38 p.m., Channel 16 opened from Kilo 1. A final broadcast in English only, without Farsi. United States warship, this concludes our official warning sequence. We have documented your presence. The Islamic Republic of Iran will determine appropriate response through its own channels. The Islamic Republic of Iran will determine appropriate response through its own channels. Not a threat. A diplomatic punt, the specific phrasing of an operational crew that had completed the mission it was tasked with and was transferring the response question to a level above its authority. The Channel 16 broadcast was not the bridge-to-bridge communication of a vessel planning a second approach. It was a closing statement. The captain did not respond on Channel 16. No one on the bridge spoke for a long moment. The officer of the deck looked at the radar display. Kilo 1 at 11.2 nautical miles and opening at 12 knots, bearing northeast toward the Chabahar area approaches. The Gulf of Oman picture was the same as it had been before 3:44 p.m. Tankers on the southern routes, the Pakistani patrol aircraft no longer on the picture, the Omani Coast Guard in its standard operating areas. A standard Gulf of Oman afternoon. He straightened his collar. The helmsman had held course and speed through a 36-minute deliberate approach. A Channel 16 formal warning, a signal round fired across the bow, an LRAD broadcast in Farsi, a Channel 16 response, and a blink. His standing order had been the transit course since the watch began. His hands were at 10 and 2. The course was the course. The captain walked to the chart table. The encounter report would go to Fifth Fleet, to the U.S. Embassy Bahrain, to the State Department through the Embassy Muscat coordination note that had been initiated at 3:53 p.m., and to the Naval Criminal Investigative Services Threat Assessment Unit that maintained the institutional record of IRGCN escalatory actions. The Seahawk's continuous aerial footage, including the signal round's complete trajectory, was the priority intelligence product. No prior encounter report in the Gulf of Oman or Hormuz theater had included aerial documentation of a warning signal round fired at a U.S. naval vessel from launch to extinction. That footage would be in the record. Full encounter report to 5th Fleet include the complete Seahawk footage archive prioritized, the signal round trajectory data, the Channel 16 transcripts in full including Kilo 1's closing broadcast, the fire control radar activation log, and the LRAD broadcast transcript in Farsi. He paused. NCIS threat assessment flagged the signal round event for the institutional record. I want this in the database as the first documented aerial recorded signal round incident in the Gulf of Oman against a U.S. Navy surface asset. He looked at the chart. Resume standard patrol pattern. Continue the operation. He looked at the radar display once more. Kilo 1 at 13.4 nautical miles and opening. Good watch. The record assembled here speaks in the language the ocean keeps. One IRGCN Zolfaghar-class fast attack vessel departed its patrol pattern in the Gulf of Oman at 3:44 p.m. and conducted a deliberate 36-minute approach to a U.S. destroyer at 24 knots. The vessel's commanding officer executed a documented escalation sequence, formal verbal warning on Channel 16 at 3:48 p.m., followed by a pyrotechnic signal round fired across the U.S. destroyer's bow at 4:07 p.m., followed by a verbal follow-up demand broadcast at 4:07:30 p.m. Signal round closest approach to U.S. destroyer bow, 350 yards. Duration of signal round burn, approximately 12 seconds. Aerial documentation of complete trajectory, yes, by Seahawk at 300 feet. Channel 16, broadcasts from Kilo 1. 3. Formal warning at 3:48 p.m. Post-round demand at 4:07:30 p.m. Closing statement at 4:38 p.m. U.S. Destroyer Channel 16 responses. 1. Post-round counterstatement at 4:08 p.m. LRAD broadcast to Kilo 1 in Farsi, yes, at 4:06 p.m. 1 minute before signal round fired. Fire control radar activated in tracking mode on Kilo 1. Yes, from 3:51 p.m. CIWS passive tracking. Yes, from 3:57 p.m. Seahawk continuous aerial documentation. Yes, from 3:50 p.m. Kilo 1 speed reduction following U.S. destroyer. Channel 16. Counterstatement from 24 knots to 18 knots within 60 seconds of broadcast receipt. Course change to east, 4:11 p.m. Full withdrawal to original patrol area, 4:38 p.m. 5th Fleet coordination maintained throughout. Yes. Embassy Muscat coordination initiated. Yes, 3:53 p.m. NCIS threat assessment notification for institutional signal round record. Yes. Course alterations by U.S. destroyer, 0. Speed reductions under approach pressure, 0. Operation continued, yes. A warning signal round in international waters is a maritime communication, not a weapon. Its meaning is precise. You are directed to comply. The response is not compliance. The response is everything already in the record before the round is fired. By 4:07 p.m., the record had been building for 23 minutes. The signal round was fired into it. The record absorbed it. The course held.